Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Strife Hayes, and this is MMOPinion, the time where I get to talk about the MMO genre and share my opinions on what it is and isn't doing right, and what strange outside ideas might make it better. Drop a like on the vid and sub to the channel for more gaming content, and ring the bell so you don't miss a single video. A massive thank you to all my supporters on Patreon and Twitch who make all my content possible. Links to both of these are below. Today's question: should Dark Souls be an MMO? And my answer is both no, and it kind of already is. Allow me to explain. People are very quick to jump on the "it should be an MMO" bandwagon. They think everything should be an MMO. Legend of Zelda, Pokemon. I mean, people wanted Skyrim as an MMO for ages, then Elder Scrolls Online happened and people were annoyed it wasn't exactly like Skyrim. And this is where the issue lies. Making something into an MMO changes the core mechanics, sometimes so significantly that it doesn't feel like the original game anymore, and that is exactly what would happen with a Dark Souls MMO. Dark Souls is one of the greatest video games in history. It's so damn good it effectively spawned a genre. All the action-adventure games are now described as Souls-like. But what is Souls-like? What does Dark Souls do that makes it so iconic and everything that it is? And would it translate to the MMO scene? Let's examine. Dark Souls is a third-person hack-and-slash adventure game, so the camera angle and overall idea, controlling a mighty warrior through a dangerous landscape, would fit perfectly. No issues so far. Dark Souls casts you as the chosen undead, the one destined to either continue or break the endless cycle of death and rebirth this land is plagued by. Or maybe you aren't the chosen undead. It's kind of obscure, and it's only through your actions in-game that you can either confirm or deny your part as the chosen one. This theme also fits perfectly to the MMO setting. The idea that every player is chosen always annoys me, but the idea that every player has the potential to be chosen, and will only confirm this through their actions, that's fantastic. That's basically saying, yeah, there's a prophecy, but we don't know which one of you it applies to. This makes the player feel something better than gifted. It makes them feel that they have potential, but it's not unlocked yet. They have to work for the reward of being important. And where does it take place? In a magical fantasy world spanning multiple varied biomes, from towering castles to deep dank swamps, foggy forests and lava-filled keeps. The world lends itself perfectly to an online adventure. Players would love to travel through these amazing locations. And how about the enemies and monsters that inhabit the world? Well, you've got some terrific things, from your standard skeletons and zombies up to dragons and drakes. Then you've got awesome gruesome horrors, tree creatures, two-headed spiders, a 30-foot deadly dancer. The creatures in Dark Souls would fit so perfectly into an MMO, I'm amazed they haven't been stolen yet. Then you've got items and equipment, such a huge variety of weapons, armor and spells, from swords and axes to twin blades or hammers, even just fists and sticks. The weapon variety in Dark Souls is almost an endless source of fun. And then the armor, which is so closely tied to the world, so full of history. Each location has its own defining set. Some of them have special resistances to certain magical attacks, like poison or fire, because the people that had to wear them back in the game's history would have lived within poisonous or flaming places, and so they needed the protection, and it all just fits thematically. God, there's almost an MMO's worth of items in here already. So that's a few perfect fits. Third-person action-adventure in a doomed world with a hero's journey, interesting locations, varied and interesting enemy design, extensive weapons and armor. Why wouldn't a Dark Souls MMO work? And the answer is, 1, it kind of already is an MMO, I'll address that later, and then 2 major issues. The first is combat lag, the second is themes of the game. Let's deal with the easiest first, combat lag. A game having combat doesn't make it Souls-like. I feel the defining feature of a Souls-like game is how tight and accurate the combat is, from hitboxes to player agency on a moment-to-moment gameplay basis. In a normal combat game, attacking forward, say slashing a sword or hitting down with a hammer, will damage any enemy in your general forward area. This is because what the game does is create a 3D virtual box in front of your character, a hitbox. We'll call this the damage zone. Then any enemy within the damage zone gets hit. This is all done behind the scenes. Now, most games, in order to save time and make processing stuff quicker, just use a general damage zone of in front of you, and then they use the general character model of sort of where you are. The simpler these calculations, the more you can do accurately, and keeping the damage zone box as a simple geometric shape that only exists at one point in time makes it very easy to do a lot of these very quickly. But Dark Souls doesn't do this. Dark Souls tracks the weapon itself on an almost frame-by-frame basis and only applies the damage zone to the actual 3D model of the weapon, and your hitbox is only tracked to the model of your character. There are no general calculations. They are all very specific. What this means is Dark Souls has incredibly accurate combat, as shown by this video here. You can lie down to avoid attacks, or this clip from Hitbox Porn on Reddit, showing how the blades narrowly miss and thus don't register as a hit. The issue with this system is, because it's tracking such an accurate hitbox and updating it so many times a second, it's very processor heavy. It takes a lot of computing power to accurately track all these minute movements, and while this is fine for a single player game, imagine having hundreds of players all fighting using this system. You'd need a server that could track every frame-perfect input from every single player, calculate them all, then relay them back to every player split second. You'd need to do that 60 times a second to play at a 60 frames a second rate. Then any input from any player would change this. Maybe they'd roll or switch weapons. Ultimately, it'd take such a fast internet connection and such an immensely powerful processor, both server and client side, you'd never be able to get combat as smooth as the offline regular Dark Souls. Remember how I said making a game into an MMO would lose some of its main qualities? Making Dark Souls the MMO would involve trimming combat accuracy back so heavily to make it playable that you'd basically end up with a generic action hack and slash, and it would lose the Souls-like combat accuracy. Along with this quality, you'd lose a major combat choice that ties in with the themes, and that's the bonfire. Resting at a bonfire heals you, but it also respawns enemies. It's a trade-off you actively choose to make. You get health back, but enemies get to come back. You're saying to the game, I failed to make it to the next bonfire, let me try again, and the game punishes you for your failure by reviving all the enemies. In an MMO, healing wouldn't be able to work this way, as MMOs rely on a shared consistent overworld that all players experience simultaneously. You would now be able to heal, and the game would have no real way of punishing you for the choice, because to do so by respawning enemies would also punish all the other players who didn't choose to heal. So the bonfire system would have to be reworked, which again is a core element of Dark Souls being modified to fit the requirements of an MMO. So that's just the basic combat changes you'd make. But let's imagine we master quantum computing and data isn't an issue. We can process the incredibly accurate hitboxes and not change combat at all. Well, in that case, let's look at the more important aspect of the game. The themes of it. Dark Souls is a game about loneliness. It's a game about isolation, about being a lone traveler in a dying world and journeying through the ashes of a once great civilization. You get to see the failures of previous heroes. The few NPCs you do meet are extremely memorable precisely because of how few you do. You remember Solaire because he's taking this journey with you. You remember Patches because he betrays you. You remember these few people because in a world devoid of intelligent life, they stand out as memorable. The journey you go on in Dark Souls is a solitary one, sitting alone by a bonfire, fighting a giant boss alone, and eventually making the choice to ignite or snuff out the first flame alone. While you can summon other players or NPCs to your world, or get invaded and attacked by other players, these are fleeting moments of connection. They're highlights, they're tiny exaggerated moments within a much more isolated world. Either helpful or harmful, they exist within a vast emptiness. Seeing another player in Dark Souls is so satisfying because of how rare it is. Summoning an NPC for a boss and winning is so bittersweet because then they leave. And joining a random player, aiding them and then parting is so soul-crushingly beautiful because you had no way to contact them again. Your time together was brief, intense, and ultimately over. Even while they are with you, you're limited in communication. You can't talk, only write down pre-suggested signs on the floor or point. You communicate on a rudimentary primal level, often having to show someone what you want instead of explaining it. And when they finally do understand, you feel this synchronicity, this bond, and it feels good because you've communicated in spite of the limitations. The theme of loneliness with intense, short moments of connection runs through all three Dark Souls games, and it's what helps build the atmosphere to such a suffocating, depressing smog. A blanket of despair lies around the land. The only thing that pushes you onward is your own unflinching belief that you should go on, because there's no one around to cheer for you. Combine that with the fact that when you kill a large boss in Dark Souls, they remain dead. They do not respawn. This is because your actions have permanent consequences. Your choices can affect the world around you in a permanent way. The world is not stable and does not return to default when you log off. You are able to remove important things from the world permanently, providing you have the skill to do so. And this skill involves all aspects of gameplay. You are the tank and the DPS and the healer. You are the one-man solution to every problem. You can't simply take your role within a team because you are the team. You need to master every aspect and every role of combat to defeat this game. Now, remove all that and imagine the world filled with life. Players dressed in the most ridiculous outfits, jumping on the roof, role-playing, talking to each other freely, agreeing to take down the hardest enemies with a cheesy tactic of tank and spank, joking, PMing you about what they had for lunch. And when you kill a boss, it'll respawn later on. Nothing you do has any permanent relevance to the world anymore. Imagine how the game would feel if you remove the overwhelming feeling of oppressive failure and replace it with life and jovial enjoyment. You'd be removing one of the core themes of Dark Souls. You'd be turning the game into an active party, when Dark Souls is actually you arriving in the world after the party has finished, seeing the bad repercussions of that. So the very act of adding more players to the Dark Souls world would involve changing the combat system hitbox detection, replacing it with a more generic, less accurate one due to information packet limitations, removing the bonfire healing mechanic because it's no longer a single player choice in a single player game, and now a single player choice in a vastly populated game, and adding more people would be basically gutting the atmosphere of isolation that the series prides itself on. You might be seeing now why making Dark Souls an MMO would be the absolute antithesis of what a Dark Souls game is. An MMO game is about community, connection, and shared experience, while Dark Souls is a game about loneliness, isolation, and the conquering of insurmountable odds on your own, with only brief and fleeting flashes of connection to anyone or anything else. If you were to make a Dark Souls MMO, you'd need to do a few things. You'd need to make it so every player exists on an identical but individual version of the game world. This way the bonfire mechanic doesn't need to be changed. You'd need to give players very limited way to connect to other players, either through agreed upon choice or through aggressive player versus player invasions. And you'd need to limit connection time one player could spend with another to keep the feeling of overwhelming isolation. And if you did all that, do you know what you'd get? You'd get Dark Souls. The game, as it is now, is as close to an MMORPG as it's capable of getting, whilst not sacrificing any of the systems or themes that make it so damn good. While Warcraft, Guild Wars 2 and RuneScape might all be about inclusion and teaming up, Dark Souls is about exclusion and solo success, but it does still have a system of joining other players, and it could be considered massive. There are many thousands of players playing the Dark Souls games together at any one time. They're just not always in connection with one another. It's online, it's an RPG. It actually does tick the boxes to already be an MMO. It's just one with heavily limited player-to-player connection. So let's address those limitations and see how they also apply to other MMOs. If you and I were to both play Runes of Magic but not see another player, does it make it less of an MMO? Well, no, because the system to make it an MMO is still present. If we were to both play World of Warcraft, standing in the exact same place but on different servers and not see each other, does that make it not an MMO? Well, no, because we exist on different worlds within the same game. What about the you can play offline element? Well, Shroud of the Avatar had that, and despite being an awful game, it is without doubt an MMO. Maybe it's because you can't have many players together at once. Well, Dark Souls 3 allows battles of 6 players, so up to 6 people can be together. Now let's contrast that with a feature from the Elder Scrolls Online. ESO uses its super server or mega server technology, with all players existing on the same server but not always being phased in for every other player. This means if you and I were standing next to each other on the same world, the same shard at the same time, we still might not be able to see or interact with another. We'd play the game being oblivious to the other person. Does this feature make it less of an MMO? Well, no, it's a choice the game is making to remove a player from the vision of another to keep the processing and the ambience of the game at an optimal level. Dark Souls is doing exactly the same as this. It's just increased the number of people it removes from a few to basically everyone. Dark Souls has thousands of players, sometimes hundreds of thousands of players, all existing on their own shard, all interacting in minute ways, all connecting through the paradoxical shared experience of total isolation. So should Dark Souls be an MMO? In my opinion, in a strange way, it already is. It's just one focusing on you and not on other people. Cheers for watching my MMO opinion on Dark Souls being an MMO. Agree or disagree, or got a question about MMOs you want answered? Leave a comment below. A huge thank you to all my supporters on Patreon and Twitch who make all my content possible. You can support the Patreon from only £1 a month. Come and join me on Twitch, Twitter or Discord. Links to all of these are below, and as always, have a great day.